Hello, YouTubers. This is Joe Kersey here at 5 till 1700, so I guess 1655 on Eastern Time on April 8th, 2017. Gonna blow my nose. Sorry, guys. I didn't sleep very well last night, and I got to the point where at 3 in the morning, I just couldn't get back to sleep. I didn't want to get up and sit out here at the table and do stuff, so I just kind of lay there, you know. Then about 20 to 6, I got up. And, if I have another night like that tonight, I'm going to take some additional pain medicine for it. I held off because, you know, you want to space this stuff out and make it last and all that. But that was bullshit last night. So, anyway, God bless us all. I'm drinking the next to the last of these horrible Boston lagers. Sorry, Sam Adams, I really generally like your stuff, but this is a horrible, horrible batch. Maybe you will do better next time. As I mentioned yesterday, I only got 2 telemarketing calls. I got a call this morning around, must have been around 10:30 in the morning, and I thought, well, who is this? Well, it was my buddy Tony out in Seattle, and so in a short amount of time we ended up doing Skyping, and we talked for about 2.5, 3 hours. And it was great fun. Now he and his guy had been out. He and Jim had gone out to Jim's mother's funeral out in Chicago, and Tony, there were a lot of stories about who they met and the food they ate and restaurants they went to and churches they went to and that sort of thing, and it's always fun to hear about that. So I enjoyed hearing that, and they got back safely, so that's good. But inevitably we got talking about some stuff, which I might get into here in a minute. Now today I actually estimated my tax for next year, and so I wrote the first installment of the checks for that. I was going to go to the bank and stuff today, and the post office today, and the store today, but it just didn't work out. That often is the case. I've got time. I'll get there in time. We got time, as we often do, we get talking about all sorts of things, and we sort of go off the wall and circle back on each other. And I'll talk about this thing second. But Tony brought up a point which I've often thought about here, just because anybody that walks around in a Walmart or a store or out in the public concourse realizes that there are, at least in the Midwest, meaning 50 miles west of the East Coast and 50 miles in from the West Coast. That's the Midwest. That's also called flyover country for all the arrogant sons of bitches out there. And you got a lot of people out there with big asses. Really big asses. And so we got talking about people who go and have these liposuctions, you know. And if you've never seen a liposuction, it's quite a violent, awful procedure. You've got this trocar, which is, well, it can be anywhere from like a ½ inch, 3/8 of an inch, well, 3/8 inch, ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch to, you know, once you get a hole established, you can get up to like an inch, you know, diameter thing. And you've got, it's like a rounded tube, and there's a suction catheter that comes off the end, and then you've got, it's almost like you've got like a window that rolls either way, and then you've got like a little tip, and you can kind of, you know, while this is under suction, you can kind of, you know, scrape out the fat and things, and it goes down the tube, and it's like down into this bottle. And I've got a really strong stomach, you know. Things don't bother me too much, and you know, dead babies in a bottle in a museum don't bother me at all. But you see these big chunks of fat going down this suction tube into this jar on the floor. The only other thing worse than that I saw going down into a jar on the floor through a suction catheter were these abortions up at the University of Michigan when I was up there as a student in April of 1974. It wasn't at the University of Michigan, but it was at one of these Parenthood, you know, Planned Parenthood. I guess the Planned Parenthood was like, you know, we don't want to be parents, so we're going to suck it out, you know. Then the guy would take it out and spread it out in a gauze to try to find all the parts, you know. Be sure he didn't leave anything behind. Well, they don't have to do that with fat because, you know, a fat ass is a fat ass, so they don't have to spread the fat ass out on the tissue to find out it's a fat ass. I got thinking about this guy. There was an obstetrician at Grant, or an OBGYN guy at Grant. He was actually triple boarded. He was first boarded in psychiatry. His dad had been a psychiatrist. Then he was second boarded in family practice, which is general practice. And then he actually got a legitimate board in OBGYN. He was a very good OBGYN guy. And given his sort of off-the-wall mentation, he and I got along really, really well. And we cooked up this idea that you'd have an idea for you know, like traveling laparoscopy vans, traveling laparoscopy BPS vans, where, you know, you travel around and you know, if you want your sterilization, once your tube's tied, you know, you get the van coming over, and then you can get your laparoscopy BPS done in the back of the van. It's very much like modeled on the dog grooming vans, where they drive around and they groom the dogs and so forth. And then we got talking about, and then Tony and I got talking about, we'd do the, you'd have like this Honeywagons fat sucker van, you know. It would be like a honeywagon fat sucker van. So we had a lot of fun with that. Dog groomers and laparoscopy BPS vans, and then a Honeywagons fat sucker van. And you can compare that with the wandering herniatomist that I talked about here a few weeks ago. Although, well, I suppose you could have a wandering herniatomist van, but, you know, you can get a much better hernia repair in a hospital in an operating room rather than having the wandering herniatomist come around, you know, like the traveling tinker. But meanwhile, well, actually, meanwhile, I've got this thing here. What's that? Mother's. Oh, well, that's neither here nor there. That had to do with my friend Brad keeping me drunk with vodka during my dad's funeral. Well, of course, this was the genesis of all this was Tony and his man going over to Chicago for Jim's mother's funeral. But what Tony and I got talking about this morning was how my mother had this huge fixation, and she really did have this huge fixation. I may have mentioned this before. Doesn't matter, I'll mention it again if I have done. She liked, and this went well on almost up to the age of 5, till the time I was 5. She liked the sticker. There was a jar of Borax, there was this Borax ointment. It was kind of like a pale yellow ointment, like maybe a little bit more than a pint jar of this stuff, and she'd insist on putting me up there on a table, even when I was 5, and she'd hold my legs up, she'd pull my pants down, and she'd stick her finger in this Borax ointment, and stick it up my behind, and working around. I don't know what the hell she was getting out of that, or what she hoped to accomplish. She seemed to get a great deal of fun out of that, though. I don't know what that was all about. My mother and her big Boraxo finger, all greased up and up there. And then when Tony and I got talking about how you might have, actually, then we got talking about funeral orations. Well, of course, I wasn't allowed to say anything at my mother's funeral, and I guess he was talking about things that were and were not said at this particular funeral, and I remarked on some funeral things that had happened at our church, how our last rector had instituted a policy of, after several really bad, disastrous, open mic days, so to speak, at a funeral. He said, if you want to say something, submit a script, and he would approve the script and edit the script, and then you could stand up and have your say. Which worked a lot better, but before that we had some really disastrous times in which, one of which included a family that stood up bit by bit. 3 different people stood up and pissed and moaned about how the cut glass, milk glass, special glass collection that their mother had accumulated was going to be distributed. So I thought if I could have done a sort of a more dedicated video on this, I would have called it, well, of course, bees like that Boraxo, it smells sweet, so I'd have to say, title of the video, Boraxo, Bees, and Buttholes, but I don't think I'm going to be making that video, but maybe I will. Okay. Alrighty, that pretty much covers that, actually. Okay. Keep calm and return fire. Sit calmly and enjoy life. So I'll say bye-bye, YouTubers. Alrighty, bye-bye.